The floor felt cold beneath my bare feet, a shock that usually grounded me, pulling me back from the edge of some swirling thought. But tonight, the chill didn't register. All I felt was the fire spreading through my chest, freezing my lungs, burning behind my eyes. The laptop screen glowed blue in the dark study, a single line of text like a razor blade. Payment processed, mortgage payoff. And beneath it, the name. Not ours. Hers. The air left the room. Sound faded to a distant hum. The world outside the window, just moments ago a familiar, comforting grid of city lights, blurred into an indifferent smear. My hands shook, hovering over the trackpad, afraid to touch it again, afraid the pixels might rearrange themselves, reveal a typo, a mistake, anything but the stark, undeniable truth staring back at me. It was real. The number was large, impossibly large for a simple payment. It was a payoff. Her mortgage. Paid in full. By him. My husband. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. We built a life that looked, from the outside, like granite. Solid, unyielding, built to last. A comfortable house in a neighborhood where the trees were older than the streets, cars that were reliable but not ostentatious, vacations that were relaxing but not extravagant. He was steady, reliable. That's what everyone said. My rock. My harbor in the storm. We met young, built slowly. There wasn't a dramatic beginning, no whirlwind romance that swept us off our feet into inevitable chaos. It was a slow, steady climb, hand in hand. Mutual respect, shared goals. Or so I thought. I came from money. Yes, everyone knew that, but I'd always worked to build my own identity, my own small corner of the world that wasn't overshadowed by the family name, the family trust, the vast, intricate web of my father's empire. I had my own career, my own friends, my own quiet independence. He admired that, he said. He wasn't interested in the family money, he claimed.
Just me.
That felt good.
Secure.
Our life was made of quiet routines. Morning coffee together, the shared crossword puzzle on Sundays, the predictable rhythm of his workday, the comfortable silence of evenings spent reading or watching some documentary. There was affection, habit, a deep-seated familiarity that felt, until this moment, like love. A mature love, maybe. One that had weathered the early excitements and settled into something deeper, quieter. We talked about the future, vague plans, retirement dreams that felt safe and achievable. He was good with finances, detail-oriented. He managed our joint accounts, paid the bills, handled the investments. It made sense. I trusted him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. He was the man who knew the exact way I liked my tea, the one who held my hand during scary movies, the one whose breathing I fell asleep to every night. The name on the mortgage payoff belonged to a woman he worked with. Casual mentions over dinner. Sarah in accounting, or Sarah had a good idea in the meeting, nothing that ever pinged on my radar. She was just a colleague. A name attached to a task or a comment about the office politics I barely cared about. I'd probably met her at a company party once, a forgettable face in a crowd of forgettable faces. She wasn't a threat. She was a footnote in his workweek. Or so I believed. Finding it wasn't intentional. A notification popped up on his personal email account, visible on the shared desktop computer we sometimes used in the study. It was from a bank. A routine statement, I assumed. I was just closing out something else, my catching the subject line. Curiosity, that quiet, innocent impulse, made me click. And then I saw it. The payoff notification. The amount. The name. The cold dread began in my stomach, a knot tightening with impossible speed.
This couldn't be right. It had to be a mistake.
He managed finances for other people, sometimes little favors for friends, maybe. But a mortgage payoff? For a colleague? It was absurd. My mind scrambled for explanations, grasping at straws in a sea of rapidly rising panic. Maybe she was in trouble? Maybe he was helping her out. A short-term loan he hadn't mentioned? The sheer size of the number crushed that possibility. This wasn't a helping hand. It was a rescue boat, gilded and paid in full. The immediate aftermath was a blur of physical sensations. The room tilting, the air thinning. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Every memory, every quiet moment of shared life, every kiss, every whispered promise, felt tainted, rewritten. The granite foundation didn't just crack, it disintegrated into dust around my feet. He was due home any minute. I had to move. I had to erase the fact that I'd seen it, put the mask back on. My fingers fumbled with the mouse, closing windows, clearing the browser history with a frantic urgency that felt both pathetic and essential. By the time I heard his key in the lock, I was sitting on the sofa in the living room, pretending to read, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The first few days were a masterclass in performance. I smiled, I nodded, I asked about his day, I cooked dinner, I went through the motions of our life. But inside, I was a detective in a psychological thriller. Every word he spoke a potential clue, every glance a possible betrayal. He seemed normal, maybe a little preoccupied, but his job was demanding. Was that it? Was I imagining things? Was this whole thing a misunderstanding? The hope was a painful flicker against the dark certainty growing in my gut. I needed more. I couldn't confront him based on one email notification, no matter how damning it seemed. I needed proof, context, the full, ugly picture. My investigation was clumsy at first. I didn't know what I was doing. I checked bank statements, credit card bills, looking for large outflows of cash, anything linked to her name or her address. It was like sifting through mountains of sand for a single grain of gold. He was careful. Too careful? Or just private? I hesitated to dig deeper, torn between the need to know and the terrifying possibility of what I might find. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. My nights were spent online, researching forensic accounting, digital footprints, discreet background checks. My days were a tightrope walk, balancing the performance of a happy wife with the relentless gnawing anxiety and the burgeoning rage. I found another transaction. Smaller this time, but regular. Monthly payments to a florist near her office. And then a credit card bill with charges for expensive dinners, jewelry stores, a weekend trip to a city known for romantic getaways. All dated over the last year. The pattern was undeniable. He wasn't just helping a colleague, he was funding a life, her life, while pretending to build our future. The quiet man, my steady rock, was living a double life, weaving a tapestry of lies so intricate I hadn't seen the seams. The betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the calculated deceit, the financial manipulation, the sheer audacity of using our shared life as a cover for a secret one. The anger solidified into a cold, hard lump in my chest. It wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about a fundamental violation of trust, a theft of my reality. I started keeping a log. Dates, times, amounts, notes on suspicious behavior. I felt like a spy in my own home. Every casual question felt like an interrogation. Every touch felt like a violation. The physical intimacy between us became unbearable, a charade that made my skin crawl. I started making excuses, headaches, stress from work, anything to avoid his touch, his presence. He seemed oblivious, or maybe he just didn't care. That thought was almost worse than the betrayal itself. Did I mean so little that he could do this, risk everything, and not show a flicker of guilt or concern? The mistress, Sarah. I started looking into her more. Public records, social media, her profiles were locked down tight. A professional caution or something more? What kind of woman accepts a paid-off mortgage from a married man? What kind of power did she hold over him? Or was she just a willing participant, enjoying the benefits of his deception? I couldn't access his phone, it was always locked or with him. But I found old utility bills, junk mail with her name on it, confirming the address linked to the mortgage. A small, unassuming house in the suburbs, now hers, free and clear, courtesy of my husband. The struggle became a lonely one. I couldn't confide in friends. The shame was too deep, the story too unbelievable. My family? Telling them felt like admitting failure on a cosmic scale. My father, especially. He built his empire on shrewdness, on seeing the angles others missed. Admitting I'd been this blind, this fundamentally wrong about the man I'd shared my life with for years, felt impossible. I was the daughter who wanted to make it on her own, prove my worth outside the family shadow. This felt like being dragged back into that shadow, exposed and vulnerable. The financial aspect gnawed at me. Where did the money come from? Was it from our joint savings? Investments? Was he siphoning funds from somewhere else? This wasn't just personal anymore. It was about our shared financial security, the foundation he had supposedly been protecting. The thought that my money earned or inherited, could have been used to finance his affair and buy his mistress a house was sickening. It added another layer of cold fury to the mix. The tension in the house became a physical thing, thick and suffocating. We were two strangers orbiting each other, performing a well-rehearsed play for an audience of none. My smile felt brittle, my laughter hollow. He didn't seem to notice the change, or if he did, he attributed it to my stress or my moods. The dismissiveness stung, reinforcing the sense of his separate reality, the one where I was just a predictable fixture he could lie to without consequence.
I started making plans.
Legal consultations, discreetly gathering financial documents I could access. Divorce seemed inevitable, but how to protect myself? How to ensure I wasn't left adrift, financially or emotionally, after years of building a life together, only for him to unravel it. And how to make sure he didn't get away with it, didn't just walk away from the wreckage he'd created, leaving me to pick up the pieces while his mistress lounged in her mortgage-free house. The idea of him facing no real repercussions festered, turning the cold anger into a quiet thirst for something more than just a legal separation. I wanted accountability. I wanted him to understand the magnitude of what he had done. Then came the news. A casual mention from my brother during a strained family dinner I almost skipped. "The bank acquisition is finalized," he said, swirling his wine. "Closed the deal this morning." Massive portfolio, I nodded vaguely, trying to focus on the conversation, not the turmoil inside me. My father's trust had been expanding its reach, buying up assets, diversifying. Banks were a new frontier. I knew it was happening, but I hadn't paid close attention to the specifics. Numbers and corporate names usually blurred for me. "Which one?" I asked, making polite conversation. My brother named it. A regional bank holding company. The name sounded vaguely familiar. He went on about the details, the size of the portfolio, the strategic advantage, the regulatory hurdles cleared. My mind drifted. Later that night, alone in the study, the laptop open again, I was reviewing my notes, looking at the scanned document of the mortgage payoff notification. The bank logo caught my eye. The bank that had processed the payoff. The bank that held her mortgage. I froze. I looked closer at the logo, the name. Then I pulled up the news article about my family's acquisition. The name of the holding company. The list of subsidiary banks it owned. My eyes scanned the list, my heart starting a slow, heavy beat in my chest. And there it was. The same bank. The one that held Sarah's mortgage. The bank my husband had paid off. The bank that was now, as of this morning, part of my family's empire. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, but instead of collapsing, I felt a surge of ice water flooding my veins. It wasn't panic. It was pure, undiluted clarity. The world didn't tilt. It snapped into sharp, sudden focus. The fog of betrayal and confusion lifted, replaced by a chilling, exhilarating understanding of the situation. He had unknowingly entangled himself and his mistress in the intricate web of the very family he had tried to distance me from, the family whose wealth he had, paradoxically, been secretly siphoning to fund his lies. The mistress's mortgage wasn't just a debt paid off, it was an asset held by an institution my family now controlled. My family, which meant indirectly I controlled it. The legal, financial, and administrative levers of that bank were now, potentially, at my fingertips. The victimhood I had been drowning in evaporated. I wasn't just a wronged wife anymore. I was a woman holding a very specific, very powerful key to the situation. The abstract betrayal had suddenly become concrete, tangible, and, most importantly, leverageable. The game had changed. This wasn't just about getting divorced and moving on. This was about strategic consequence. It was about turning the tables in a way that didn't just hurt him, but dismantled the very foundation of his deceit, the secret life he had built with my resources. The power was intoxicating, a dangerous, thrilling counterpoint to the pain. The nature of the crisis shifted entirely. It was no longer my crisis of discovering betrayal. It was their impending crisis, the one they knew nothing about, the one I was now in a unique position to orchestrate. The fear I'd felt gave way to a cold, hard determination. I stopped focusing on the hurt, the emotional mess of his infidelity. My mind became a battlefield, mapping out possibilities, potential moves. How could I use this? How could I ensure maximum impact? It wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about exposing the truth, yes, but doing it in a way that resonated, a way that used the very instruments of his deceit against him. The mistress's house, her newly acquired mortgage-free sanctuary, funded by my pain and my husband's lies, suddenly became the focal point. It wasn't just a house, it was a monument to their deception. And now, the bank that held the original mortgage, the bank whose systems recorded that payoff, the bank whose policies governed foreclosures and asset management, was under the umbrella of my family's company. The irony was sharp, almost poetic. He thought he was securing her future. He had, in fact, inadvertently placed it within my reach. My days took on a new rhythm. The performance of normalcy continued, but underneath, my mind was racing. I delved deeper into the structure of the bank acquisition, the reporting lines, the key personnel. I needed to understand how much influence I could realistically wield, how to navigate the corporate labyrinth without drawing suspicion from my husband, or even from my own family, who had no idea about my personal connection to one small mortgage in their massive new portfolio. I had to be careful. One wrong step could expose me, warn him, or complicate things unnecessarily. The feeling was strange, a mixture of clinical detachment and simmering anger. The hurt was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by the strategic challenge. It was like playing a complex game of chess, where the pieces were people and assets, and the stakes were measured in shattered lives and financial ruin. I wasn't just planning a divorce. I was planning a dismantling. His comfortable, compartmentalized world was about to collide. I discreetly reached out to a trusted contact within the family trust's legal team. Someone who knew the ropes, who understood the complexities of the new acquisition, but who wasn't directly involved in our family's personal lives. I framed it hypothetically at first, a hypothetical scenario, about a potential issue with an asset in one of the newly acquired banks, a strange transaction perhaps linked to fraudulent activity. Their response confirmed my understanding. The family trust, as the new owner, had significant oversight and could initiate internal reviews, audits, and make decisions regarding assets, including mortgages and their status. The path was clearing. The crisis for him and the mistress was the hidden countdown clock ticking toward zero. They were living their lives, perhaps planning their future together in her newly paid-off house, completely unaware that the walls were about to come crashing down. Every normal evening at home, every casual comment he made, felt like a scene in a movie where the audience knows the bomb is under the table, but the characters are blissfully ignorant. The dry humor in the situation wasn't lost on me. He'd used his knowledge of finance to betray me, and now, the vast, impersonal machinery of high finance, governed by my family, was about to deliver the reckoning. I refined my plan. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about using the financial trail, the mortgage payoff itself, as the weapon. It wasn't enough for him to admit it. He had to face tangible consequences rooted in the very act of betrayal. The house, her house, would be the focal point. How to legally challenge the payoff. Could it be clawed back? Could the bank, now under new ownership, look into suspicious transactions that predated the acquisition? The legal intricacies were complex, but the principle was simple. The money came from our shared life, facilitated by his deception, and was used to acquire an asset now subject to my family's oversight. The emotional toll of this double life, The constant performance, the strategic planning, was immense. I was running on pure adrenaline and a potent mix of anger and cold resolve. The sadness would hit me in unexpected waves, seeing a photo of us from years ago, hearing a song that used to be ours, but I pushed it down. The time for grief would come later. Right now, there was work to be done. There was a trap to set. And he, my steady, reliable husband, was walking right into it, completely blind. The deepening crisis wasn't just financial, it was existential for him. His carefully constructed reality, built on a foundation of lies, was about to crumble. The moment of decision arrived not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet click of my laptop mouse. I had gathered everything. The initial payoff notification, the subsequent transactions, records of his business trips aligning with charges in that romantic city, the address of Sarah's house, the name of the bank, and the news articles confirming the family trust's acquisition of the bank holding company. The legal counsel had laid out the options, the potential challenges, the likelihood of success. It was risky, potentially messy, but possible. The most satisfying path involved the bank itself. Using the bank's internal processes, initiating a review of the transaction as potentially fraudulent or linked to marital asset misappropriation. It would be quiet at first, an administrative inquiry, but it would lead back to him and to her. And it would put her primary asset, the house, directly under scrutiny from an institution I could influence. The turning point was accepting the coldness required. This wasn't about explosive arguments or tearful confessions. It was about precision, leverage, and using the system he thought he was so adept at navigating against him. I shed the last vestiges of the heartbroken wife. I was the daughter of a man who built empires, and I understood, finally, what that kind of power meant and how to wield it. The decision was made. I would use the bank. I would initiate the process through the family trust channels. I would let the system expose him. And when it did, I would be ready. My determination was absolute. There was no turning back. The reckoning was coming. The setting for the climax wasn't dramatic by design, but life has a way of injecting theater into the mundane. It was a Tuesday evening. He was late getting home from work, citing a last-minute meeting. I knew, with a chilling certainty that came from the information I'd gathered, that his meeting wasn't with clients. It was with her. My plan had been in motion for a week. The internal review at the bank had been initiated. Inquiries were quietly being made. I knew it was only a matter of time before it reached him, before the bank flagged the transaction internally, before someone asked him questions he couldn't answer. I just didn't know when or how he would find out. He walked in looking tired, loosening his tie, the picture of the weary breadwinner. He gave me a perfunctory kiss, asked about my day, went to pour himself a drink. The normalcy was almost unbearable. I sat on the sofa, watching him, the knot of anticipation in my stomach twisting tighter. I had the documents spread out on the coffee table, innocuous-looking papers mixed with the damning evidence. His eyes scanned them briefly as he set his drink down, not really seeing. The text message came as he sat down. His phone buzzed on the cushion next to him. He glanced at it. His face, just moments before relaxed, drained of color. His eyes widened, fixed on the screen.
I didn't need to see it.
I knew. The bank. The inquiry had reached him. He looked up, his eyes darting around the room, finally landing on me. His expression was a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning horror. He knew I wasn't supposed to know about Sarah, about the affair. But did he know? This.
What?
What is this? He stammered, his voice hoarse. He wasn't talking about the text yet. He was looking at the papers on the table, finally focusing. His gaze fixed on the mortgage payoff notification, the bank name, her name. He fumbled for his phone, swiping at the screen, his movements jerky. That, I said, my voice steady, calm. A stark contrast to the storm inside me. Is a record of you paying off Sarah Miller's mortgage? I paused, letting the words hang in the air. His eyes widened further. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. Funny thing about that bank, I continued, picking up a newspaper clipping I had intentionally left out. It was the announcement of my family trust's acquisition. I held it up, not for him to read, but just to show him the headline. My family bought it. The whole holding company. Closed the deal last week. He stared at the newspaper, then at me, then back at his phone, where the bank's message was undoubtedly explaining the internal review of the suspicious transaction he'd made. The color drained completely from his face, leaving it ashen. His jaw slacked. The phone slipped from his trembling hand, clattering onto the coffee table amongst the papers.
There.
They're asking about it, he whispered, his voice barely audible. The bank. They're asking about the payment. Yes, I said, my voice still dangerously calm. They are. It seems suspicious transactions, even old ones, tend to pop up during internal audits, especially under new ownership. Particularly large, unexplained payoffs to individuals not clearly connected to the account holder's business. It looks like potential fraud, perhaps misappropriation of funds. I watched him, every micro-expression, every flicker of terror in his eyes. This was it. Fraud, he choked out, stumbling backward as if he'd been struck. But it's paid. It's done. It was just a loan.
Was it?
I countered, my voice hardening slightly, because the records suggest it was a full payoff, a gift, a very generous gift, from our joint accounts. To your mistress, I used the word mistress deliberately, watching him flinch as if I'd slapped him. Funny how tangled things get when you try to live two lives, isn't it? You used our life, our money, our security, to build something for her. And in doing so, you tied her future, her house, directly to the very people you tried to keep separate from yours. My family. My father's trust. The people who now own the bank that holds the documentation of your deceit. His eyes were wide, unseeing. His breath hitched in his throat. He looked around the room, as if searching for an escape, a way out of the trap that had just sprung shut around him. The reliable, steady man was gone, replaced by a cornered animal, exposed and terrified.
You
did this? He stammered, his voice trembling. You did this. I corrected, my voice flat. I just noticed. I gestured at the papers on the table. I noticed the transactions. I noticed her name. I noticed the bank. And when my family acquired that bank, I noticed the connection. Sometimes, the universe just hands you the information. What you do with it, that's the choice. He stood there, swaying slightly, staring at the floor. The color in his face hadn't returned. His hands were shaking violently. The weight of it, the affair exposed, the financial trail revealed, the knowledge that the consequence wasn't just a messy divorce, but a potential financial and legal nightmare initiated by the very institution he thought he'd circumvented, seemed to physically crush him. He didn't yell. He didn't deny it. He didn't beg. He just stood there for a long moment, his world collapsing around him, the walls of his carefully constructed lie crumbling to dust. And then, slowly, his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, a heap of tailored clothes and shattered deception, letting out a low, guttural sound that was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. He lay there, curled in on himself, the strong, steady man reduced to a trembling wreck at my feet. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and absolute, broken only by his ragged breathing. The climax wasn't a shout, it was a collapse. And I stood above it, feeling nothing but a cold, hard satisfaction that chilled me to the bone. The collapse was not the end, but a different kind of beginning. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic blend of shock, disbelief, and the swift, brutal efficiency of consequences. My husband lay on the floor for a long time, eventually helping him onto the sofa, where he remained, shell-shocked and unresponsive. His affair wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore. It was a financial irregularity flagged by a major banking institution. And the wheels of that institution were now turning. The legal team from the family trust, acting on the hypothetical inquiry I'd initiated, now very much a real-world problem, moved swiftly. The transaction was flagged for deeper review. Questions were asked. Subpoenas were issued. The quiet administrative inquiry escalated rapidly into a full-blown investigation into potential financial misconduct and marital asset misappropriation. The focus wasn't just on him, but on Sarah Miller as well. Her beautiful, mortgage-free house, the symbol of their secret life, was now under intense scrutiny. The bank had the power to demand repayment of the funds, to initiate foreclosure proceedings if the source of the money was deemed fraudulent or subject to legal challenge by a wronged spouse. The system he thought he'd used to secure her was now poised to dismantle it. My husband was forced to confront the consequences not just with me, but with lawyers, auditors, and eventually his company, who took a dim view of financial irregularities. His carefully built career, his reputation as a steady, reliable man, crumbled almost as quickly as he had. The fallout for Sarah was equally severe. The bank began proceedings. The dream house, paid for with stolen money, became a nightmare. The protection he thought he had offered her turned into her undoing. They were facing not just the end of their affair, but public exposure and potential financial ruin, all stemming from that single, arrogant act of paying off the mortgage. For me, the aftermath was a complex mix of vindication and emptiness. Seeing him reduced to that state, watching his world unravel, should have felt entirely satisfying. And there was a cold, sharp taste of triumph, yes. But underneath it was the wreckage of my own life. The marriage was over, irrevocably broken not just by the affair, but by the scale of the deception and the clinical way I had chosen to end it. The steady, comfortable life was gone, replaced by a landscape of legal proceedings, asset division, and the quiet work of rebuilding from scratch. My family was surprised. They hadn't known about the affair or my husband's infidelity, but they understood leverage. They understood consequence. There was no judgment from them about how I had uncovered it or how I chose to handle it. There was just a quiet acknowledgement of the situation and the resources available to me. They ensured I was protected legally and financially through the divorce proceedings. The money used for the payoff was eventually recovered, becoming part of the marital asset division, albeit through a complicated legal process involving the bank. Sarah lost the house. The consequences were severe and undeniable. The world didn't offer a clean, happy ending. There wasn't a moment of joyous liberation. It was more like walking out of a long, dark tunnel into a gray dawn.
I had won, yes.
I had turned the tables completely, using the instruments of his betrayal against him and his mistress with devastating effect. But the victory felt cold. It was a victory born of pain and engineered with a detachment that sometimes scared me. I had proven I could navigate complexity, wield power, and survive betrayal. But the cost was the loss of innocence, the shattering of trust, the knowledge that the man I had shared my life with was a stranger capable of profound deceit. Rebuilding has been slow. There's a quiet satisfaction in standing on my own 2 feet, independent and secure, not because of inherited wealth, but because I navigated a storm and emerged, scarred but standing. The experience taught me a harsh lesson about appearances, about the hidden lives people lead, and about the strange, interconnected ways our actions can rebound on us, often from the most unexpected directions. Sometimes, the universe doesn't just deliver karma, it hands you the hammer and lets you strike the blow yourself. And while the sound of that impact is loud, the silence that follows can be deafening. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.